Coming up on Transformers University, we are staying in Japan to discuss the 1987 toy line. We'll talk about the differences between Takara's releases and Hasbro's releases. And we'll take a deep look into some of the merchandise available in Japan in 1987, all starting right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner, operator, MadMat, behind TFU.INFO, the website, the Toy Archive, TFU News and Views podcast, this podcast, and oh so much more. And I want to welcome you to episode 108 of Transformers University. And this time around, we're staying in Japan to talk a little bit about the 1987 toy line and merchandise available in Japan to support the Headmasters cartoon series that we discussed in our previous episode and parallel the line that was released by Hasbro in North America and in Europe. What did come out in 1987? Well, let's talk a bit about that. So in Japan, and we'll talk a little bit about the names, the naming differences, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the other key differences in the lines. And we'll talk about some of the first really Japanese exclusive mainline figures starting in 1987, because that's really where they develop. And we'll begin on the Autobot side. Now, the Autobots, first off, featured the Technobots in Japan, known as the Techbots. They were sold individually and in a gift set. All the names the same as the US versions, with the exception of Computron, which in Japan was known as Computicon. The Throttlebots were all available as well in Japan, with a few name differences. Searchlight was known as Looklight, Freeway was known as Runway, and Goldbug was known as Goldback. Chase, Wideload, and Rollbar all retained their names in Japan. The Firebots were available in Japan, known in the United States as the Monster Bots, but only two were available at regular retail. Double Cross under that name, and Groats, known in the West as Grotesque, were retail releases, while Repug, aka Repugnus in the West, was a mail order only figure. Moving on from those, let's talk a bit about some of the characters that we did talk about last time in the Headmasters cartoon, because the 4 Autobot Headmaster Warriors were available in Japan, and they even had a TV commercial.
Transformer! The Headmaster! 指揮官クロームドーム発進! 見よ、ロボットがヘッドに変わる。クロームドームヘッドオン。胸のパワーでデストロンを倒せ。トランスフォーマーザ・ヘッドマスターズクロームドーム登場。
See, now it's important to note here that Chrome Dome gets his own commercial in Japan, because Chrome Dome was the leader of the Headmasters in Japan. So, being a leader character, he was a bit more important than Brainstorm, Hardhead, and Highbrow. So therefore got his own commercial. And of course, just like in the United States, Fortress Maximus also got his own commercial.
Transformer! 出現メガザラック戦え我らがヒーローフォートレスマキシマスヘッドオン強敵メガザラックを倒せトランスフォーマー最大の戦士フォートレスマキシマス
Now, while that commercial starts with a cell for Mega Zarak, the Japanese equivalent of Scorponok, Fort Max does get his own cartoon-themed commercial here in some ways, in that this one features the music from the show, features the head-on battle cry, and just like he was released in the West, Fort Max was sold in Japan. Additionally sold in Japan was the Autobot Double Spy, as he was known in Japan. That would be Punch, as well as both Autobot clones, Fastlane and Cloudraker, both sold under those names. Now, the most interesting probably thing, or one of the most interesting things from the Autobot side of the 1987 Japanese toy line were the Target Masters.
Target Master 登場。マスター戦士がガンにトランスフォー。ターゲットオン。パワーアップしてデストロンをやっつけろ。遺跡のトランスフォーマー。ターゲットマスター。謎のトランスフォーマープレゼント実施中。
So this commercial actually features the 6 Autobot Target Masters rolling into a battle, but it's not the 6 that was sold in Hasbro markets. Some of them are the same, but not all of them. They did get Sure Shot, though his Target Master partner was named Spoil instead of Spoilsport. They did get Point Blank, but his name was Blanker, and his partner Peacemaker was now known as Peaceman. Crosshairs was sold in Japan, but his partner, his name was changed from Pinpointer to Pointech. And Cup, known as Share in Japan, was sold with Recoil. Now, the big difference here is that both Blur with Haywire and Hot Rod with Firebolt were not sold in Japan in 1987. So those 2 Target Masters not released in Japan, but 2 other very important and now very famous Target Master figures were sold in Japan. Those being Artfire, which was a retool of Generation 1 Inferno to fit the Target Master. He was sold with a Nightstick, and Stepper, the retool of G1 Jazz in black, was sold with Nebulon. These characters and figures kind of reached mythic proportions early on in the fandom because they were, 1, Japanese rarities, 2, they were G1 recolors. And so they were highly sought after, and 3, they were Target Masters, which made them really weirdly unique. Now, of course, today, Stepper has been since renamed by Hasbro as Ricochet and has been sold in many, many forms. Artfire has been done in Japan and updated several times, but not in the U.S. until just recently, where he was made a Generation Selects figure, which is yet to come out. But that wraps up the Target Masters for the most part. Now, there's a little bit more on the Autobot side. There were the Cassette Bots, which were Blaster and his friends, but not Blaster as you know him. Blaster recolored in blue as Twincast and sold with Steeljaw, which had different color legs, feet, head, and tail from his single version. So the plastic color was a little different on those parts, so he had kind of a mismatched plastic. Re-released in Japan were Eject Rewind, the regular Steeljaw, and Amhorn, who is the Japanese name of Ramhorn. Additionally, 4 more cassettes were released in Japan that also kind of reached mythic proportions up until fairly recently, and those would be Graphy, Noise, Dial, and Czar. The combining Autobot cassettes, Graphy and Noise combined to form Decibel, and Dial and Czar combined to form Leg Out. Now, these used to go for a lot of money on the secondary market. They still do, but Hasbro has since reissued these molds in part of their Bumblebee movie lines, and so the demand for these has kind of dropped a bit, but I could tell you how much they went for in 1999 because I watched a friend of mine buy one for about $300 back then. So if it went for $300 then, I have no idea what and it was boxed. I have no idea what the boxed ones would go for now. Graphy and Noise and Dial and Czar are some of the more rare and interesting finds from 1987 in Japan. And finally, we wrap this up with the exclusive Japanese combiner for the Autobots.
Shoki, Getsu, Yukikaze, Suiken, Seizan, Kae, Yuke, Raiden, Destron の罠を打ち破れ。 6つの列車が1つになって合体だ。正義のトレインボットライデン。
And just going off of that commercial, if you're ever wondering the proper way to say it, is it Raiden or Raiden? The commercial does say Raiden. So the train bots, or the robot train, if you heard our last episode, is composed of Shoyuki, Getsui, Yukikaze, Seizan, Suiken, and Kien, and they form Raiden. Now, this is a holdover from the Diaclone line, much in the way Devastator was in the early part of G1. So this figure, this train combiner, there are 6 trains, and they turn into individual robots as well as a combined form of Raiden. They also have a combined vehicle mode. You can actually string the train portions together. And as I mentioned, they originate in Diaclone, so they combine very similarly to Devastator in that they require pieces in between the figures in order to make those combinations. Now, it doesn't wrap up all of the Japanese exclusives on the Autobot side. Now, there were 6 other figures released for the Autobots, and those being what are called the Cybertron Master Warriors. Those were extra Headmaster heads, so these figures were just replacement heads for either Autobots or Decepticons, really, but they were sold as Autobots. And they had a robot mode or an animal mode and turned into heads that you could then swap on to your Headmaster figures and play with the chest stats gimmicks, plus give them a different look. And those were Kirk, Leone, Shuffler, Loafer, Rodney, and Torizer. Now, those 6 figures were also available in all white versions. The all white versions are super rare, and because they were available as part of a Throttlebot promotional campaign and came free with a purchase of a Throttlebot at select stores. Which stores we don't really know at this point in time, but that means you would have had to buy one Throttlebot, and at best you would have to have figured out how to get each Throttlebot with each head to match up 6 to 6 and not duplicate figures, plus have to do it at specific stores in 1987 in Japan. So those white Headmaster heads, the Cybertron Master Warriors, are super rare. Actually, the regular ones aren't terribly easy to come by either. I do have one in my collection, Loafer. So these Headmaster heads have received a few updates in recent years. Leone was introduced in Titan's Return as Sawback, which was a head, additional head, Titanmaster, I should say, for the figures, as well as a lion vehicle that they were able to do as an homage to the original head that did turn into a lion. We also had Shuffler in that line, which was an elephant with a head that turned into a head for a robot, much like the original Shuffler, which turned into an elephant. Now, we'll talk Decepticons, the Destrons, in just a moment. But first, give this a listen. Hey, want to help out this podcast or the website TFU.INFO? There's a number of ways you can do it. Let me tell you how. You can help us directly by joining our Patreon and enrolling as a student at Transformers University. There, you'll get early access to the podcast as well as exclusive behind-the-scenes peeks and perks for as little as $1 a month. Sign up is quick and easy. Just swing on by to www.patreon.com/TFU.INFO. Another way you can help us is by using our Amazon link, www.tfu.info/Amazon. Type that into your browser whenever you want to shop at Amazon, and a portion of what you spend will be contributed back to us. It's that easy. Finally, you don't become the world's longest-running transforming toy archive without some help from other fans. We're always on the hunt for photos of figures and accessories we're missing from our pages. If you'd like to contribute, go to tfu.info/help for a list of what we need, or send an email to info@tfu.info. tfu.info, the Alpha Trion and Omega Prime of transforming toys. Now, back to the show. So, much like the Cybertrons, the Autobot side of things, the Destrons, the Decepticon side of things, had a lot of similarities to the North American Hasbro release line. The Terracons, as they were known in the United States, all had the same names and were available individually and in an Abominus gift set. The Headmaster Decepticons were known as the Crazy Trons, and actually the Headmaster Crazy Trons, and consisted of Skull, aka Skull Cruncher, Wolf, aka Weird Wolf, and Wipe, aka Mind Wipe. Additionally, Mega Zarek, as we know him as Scorponok, along with Fast Track, was available in Japan. Now, the Target Master Jetrons, which were the Target Master Decepticons in Japan, were available, but only 3 were available. Trigger Happy Misfire and Slugslinger. Cyclonus and Scourge, much like Blur and Hot Rod, were not sold as Target Masters in Japan. The Headmaster Horrorcons were available under the same name, Ape-Face and Snapdragon, as well as our favorite, Decepticon Ninja Consultant.
謎の忍者デストロンシックスショット出現 1 2君はシックスショットを6つに変えられるかトランスフォームの謎をいくつ解けるか6つに変わる忍者デストロンシックスショットただいま参上
Evil Destron Ninja Consultant, Evil Destron Ninja Consultant, Evil Destron Ninja Consultant, consulting with ninjas, submarine mode. And I want to give a big shout out to the YouTube channel for Rockman666. That channel that he has all these Japanese commercials where I pulled them from, and you should go check it out and subscribe because he's got a lot of cool stuff up on that channel, especially a lot of cool Transformers related stuff. Now, continuing on, the Clone Trons, aka Pounce and Wingspan, Pounce being the Puma and Wingspan being the Hawk, Eagle? I forget what the original U.S. commercial says. They were available under the same names, as well as the Doubletrons, what we would call the Duocons here in Battletrap and Flywheels. Now, the Cassette Trons, much like the Cassette Bots, featured a new version of Soundwave, remolded with a chest that would fit 2 cassettes as new Soundwave. Not as new Soundwave. Sound Blaster was his name, and that double cassette capacity chest was available in Japan, and one of the first exclusive remolds of that year, along with Buzzsaw, who was given a new sticker on the back of the cassette mode that allowed the chest compartment, which was red clear plastic, to decode plans to find Fortress Maximus's weak spot. Additionally, Rumble, the red one, and Frenzy, the blue one, were reissued in Japan in 1987, along with Jaguar, a.k.a. Ravage, Condor, a.k.a. Laserbeak, and Ratbat. Slugfest and Overkill, also both available in 1987 in Japan, and available via mail-away Robot Point offers were the Decepticon Insecticons, Bombshell, Kickback, and Shrapnel. And finally, one figure that was not available in 1986 that was available as a prize giveaway in 1987 were the Shakhtar Khan, as he was named in Japan, and not Na. And apparently was just the American version in American packaging, was part of a giveaway for Beast Formers, which was also available in 1987 in Japan and part of the Transformers toy line. Now, what were Beast Formers? Well, in the U.S., they were known as this.
Battle Beast! Wood! Fire! Fire burns wood! Battle Beast! Fire! Water! Water puts out fire! Battle Beast! Water! Wood! Wood beats water! Battle Beast! Battle for the fun of it! Just activate their battle badges.
I got fire! I got water! Water beats fire!
Battle Beast!
Wood! Fire! Fire beats wood!
Battle Beast can grow into an army! Collect all 84. Battle Beast!
So yes, Battle Beasts, as they were sold by Hasbro in the United States, were part of the Transformers toy line in Japan in 1987. About 75 of the figures were released as Autobots and Decepticons in 1987 over 3 series. And we're going to go deeper into that in a future episode. But I do just want you to know that those toys were released in Japan in 1987. So there have been references to them made in recent toy lines. And it's just kind of cool. So if you were ever wondering about collecting Battle Beasts and making them part of your Transformers collection, you by all means do so. I know I've done so a little bit. And also means that beasts go as far back as Headmasters and technically go all further back to 1987. But I will save my beasts have always been part of Transformers diatribe for a news and views episode in the future, I think. Now, we have some merch to talk about. We actually have a lot of merch to talk about. Now, I didn't dig too deeply into merch for 1987 because there's not a lot of good resources out there for Japanese weird, ephemera merch. So things like posters or party napkins or things like that we may be able to cover a little easier on the North American side. Just don't have that information out there readily available. And so I wanted to jump into mostly toy-related stuff, as that seems to be what most of you are interested in. So we're going to talk a little bit about candy toys and a few other interesting toy items from 1987. And we'll start with Kabaya. As we've mentioned in earlier episodes, Kabaya is a company that had a number of series of candy-related toys that were sold with little pack-in gum or mints or those sorts of things, and had model kits that you could build a Transformer toy in a single color of plastic. We won't go too deep into everything here, but we will break down a little bit of what was available. And we'll start with Transformers Choco. Now, the Choco line was made up of snap-together model kits. They were fully transformable and fairly small. The figures were sold all in one color, but there were multiple colors of each figure, including red, blue, yellow, green, and gray. So many variants to collect on the candy toys if you're trying to go for all of them. For the Headmasters line, they did 2 series. Series 1 featured the Autobot Headmasters, Brainstorm, Chrome Dome, Hardhead, Highbrow, as well as 2 Terratrons in Cutthroat and Ripper Snapper, and 2 Techbots in Lightspeed and Nosecone. In Series 2, we got both Battletrap and Flywheels, Misfire, Slugslinger, and Trigger Happy, as well as Blanker, Crosshairs, and Sure Shot. So most of the new Target Masters, these new mold Target Masters, were all in there, along with the Duocons. That takes us to Kabaya's Transformers Gum series for 1987 and for the Headmasters. And to kind of just go back to what the Gum figures were, they would be a snap-together model kit with 3 different colors of plastic inside, and then some stickers and, of course, a piece of chewing gum. Now, in Wave 6 of this line is where they enter the Headmasters series, and the first part, Wave 6 here, Chrome Dome, Highbrow, Brainstorm, and Hardhead, along with Wolf, aka Weird Wolf, and Wipe, aka Mind Wipe, were all available. Now, all of these figures, with the exception of Highbrow and Hardhead, were available in the black, red, and cream-colored plastics that were included in the kit, whereas Highbrow and Hardhead, as well as the ones we'll talk about in Wave 7, were available with blue, gray, and white plastic. And Wave 7 featured Fortress Maximus, Raiden, Megazarek, aka Scorponok, and the Ninja Consultant 6-Shot. Additionally, Raiden could be split into his individual vehicle modes. Additionally, Kabaya carried on their Milk Caramel line into Headmasters. This featured small soft rubber figures, very similar to what would be known in Hasbro markets as decoys. Now, it's in this particular year for Headmasters in 1987, the figures were actually molded onto a base that had a stamp of the character's head underneath, so you could then, dip it onto an ink pad and stamp the character's face around. These figures were available in red, blue, and yellow. Now, according to TF Wiki, they don't know if their listing is complete for this, but they do note that Trigger Happy is missing from both series, whereas the other Decepticon Target Masters do appear. And in Series 1, we get Abominus Brainstorm, Chrome Dome, Computicon, Hardhead Highbrow, Wipe, Skull, and Weird Wolf. So we get all the Headmasters as well as the 2 combiners. And in Series 2, it would be Blanker, Crosshairs, Fortress Maximus, Megazarek, Misfire, Raiden, Six Shot the Ninja Consultant, Slugslinger, and Sure Shot. That takes us to Transformers Ramune, which is a line of toys that came with a Japanese soft drink. And for Headmasters, there was a range of figures produced, but we don't know much about them. The TF Wiki, in fact, doesn't have much other than the packaging image for a highbrow figure. So your guess is as good as mine as to what was in it. Now, the Transform Junior line actually continued on into 1987 and featured single packed releases for Chrome Dome, Fortress Maximus, and Sound Blaster. And in fact, the Sound Blaster figure, it does have an entry on TFU.INFO, and it's pretty neat to look at because that's a hard one to come by. Additionally, there were multiple multi-packs available in 1987, including one that had Chrome Dome and a Rodimus Convoy non-transforming vinyl figure that we've mentioned elsewhere. It also included a die-cast figure of Metroplex. There was a Raiden gift set in 1987, as well as 2 packs of the individual characters that formed Raiden, Shoyuki and Seizan together in one pack, Yukikaze and Suiken, who happens to be in his Diaclone colors, in another 2-pack, and Ken and Getsui in a third 2-pack. Finally, there is what was known as the Cybertron Hero Set, which featured Chrome Dome, Convoy, and Fortress Maximus. And that one actually had a resurgence in the late 90s. I think there was a big warehouse find of those because those were available pretty regularly on eBay and at conventions in the late 90s and early 2000s. And these all feature transforming versions of their larger toys, scaled down a bit, and are all kind of scaled to each other at about 5 or 6 inches. Now, one more piece of merchandise to talk about are the Super Hybrid model kits. These were vinyl figures produced by Takara in 1987, and it was a canceled line, and it featured Rodimus Convoy, Galvatron, and what would have been the first released G1 version of RC. They weren't released, but they were used as lottery prizes for a number of magazines. So versions of these toys did eventually make it out to the general public. Now, the reason for this cancellation, at least as was discussed in the fandom in the 90s, was that a lot of the stock had melted while in the warehouse, while what Japanese shops had refused to put in orders, and the distributors were waiting to move them. Now, while Rodimus and RC never got official releases, though they do crop up on the secondhand market every so often, Galvatron did get a release as an exclusive to Bakkan Japan in 1997, and both a version of Galvatron normal and then what they would call his lava bath version, as well as a different color version sold over the Bakkan Japan website were available. So there's actually 3 versions of the Super Hybrid model Galvatron. And finally, that takes us to a line that often gets confused for decoys, and that is a line called Forms Robo. And very similar to decoys, they were individually bagged little soft rubber figures made up of 10 characters from, not all from 1987, some carried over from 1986 in Transformers 2010. And they are roughly twice the size of a typical decoy figure. So they're about 3 inches tall. And the characters that made into this group were Bruticus, Dinosaurer, a.k.a. Triptychon, Galvatron, Guardian, a.k.a. Defensor, Menasor, Metroplex, or Metroflex if you're in Japan, Predaking, Rodimus Convoy, Superion, and Ultra Magnus. So it's kind of neat that they had larger decoys for some of the combiner figures that would actually scale pretty well with your US decoys. So those I've seen around fairly regularly, actually. So those aren't terribly hard to come by. So if that's something that piques your interest, you should definitely hunt them down.
Thanks for listening to the show. Stick around to hear what's coming up next episode, but first, I want to fill you in on a few ways you can stay in touch with the show. Want to be on the show? Leave us a voicemail at 702-763-4838. That's 702-POD-4TFU. Or send an email to info@TFU.info. Be sure to catch us on Twitter at TFU_info and on Facebook and Instagram under the username TFU.INFO, all one word. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, where we post all of our podcasts plus special video segments, reviews, and live coverage of Transformers-related events such as New York Toy Fair and New York Comic-Con. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit us at www.tfu.info, the world's longest-running transforming toy archive.
And that will wrap things up for this episode of Transformers University. Now, if you like staying in Japan, then I want to encourage you to head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. That's patreon.com/TFU.INFO. I'm doing a special exclusive podcast for our patrons. So if you are a patron at the junior level and up, I am dropping, really, an exclusive By the Numbers episode, if you're familiar with our By the Numbers episodes, covering 1987 in Japan. There are some big differences. There's some things that are very much the same, but we'll also break down the differences in functions as translated, as well as break down some of the neat exclusive characters to 1987. So if you want to know a bit more about Artfire and Stepper or Sound Blaster and how their numbers measure up, this is your chance to listen in and find out a bit more about that. And that is exclusive to our junior level and up patrons. Now, if you want to stay here on the main show, that's fine. In about a week, we are going to drop another episode heading back to the UK as we talk about Marvel UK 125, as well as the tie-in with Action Force for a number of issues, and that is the UK equivalent to G.I. Joe. So we got another crossover with G.I. Joe coming right up, but this time across the pond in Europe. So I hope you stick around with me and check out the show. Of course, I want to thank you all for supporting the show, for being a patron, for being a listener, just downloading and hanging out for a little bit. Once again, I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind TFU.info. Until next time, see ya. Evil Destron Ninja Consultant, Evil Destron Ninja Consultant, Evil Destron Ninja Consultant, consulting with ninjas, submarine mode.